Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This webinar is recorded. We're going to talk about the future of generative AI in maritime and trade. It's a very exciting week, I think. We had Google I/O yesterday with some big announcements, Gemini Flash and so forth, and 1.5 Flash, and we had GPT-4o, which is GPT-4 Omni. We had Ilya, the chief scientist of OpenAI, leave for quote-unquote personal interests or project. So there's a lot of things going on. I think the goal of today is try to figure out the convergence between all of that and all of the world of the people on the call. That's what we're going to try to do today. So it's not going to be just about tech. It's going to be more of a conversation about, is this a big threat? Can you make money or save money? Where is this all going? We have with us Eric Topp, the head of Worldwide Solutions Strategy, Transportation, and Logistics at AWS. Hi, Eric. How are you?
How are you doing today? Great to be here and great to be part of the team, and looking forward to a robust discussion and lots of Q&A from all the participants.
Great, grill us. And Vadim, how are you today? Would you like to present yourself in a word? I like your beard. It's a great beard.
Thank you, Ami. Well, you know me, we actually know each other pretty well. I'm a solution architect at AWS, and I work closely with Windward for the past almost 2 years, I think.
Yep.
And we build great things together.
Sounds good. I love it. And you have me, and if you don't know me, then well, it's a good thing for you. You know us, we're Windward, we're the leading maritime AI company in the world. Very happy for you to join us on the call. And we help people make more money or reduce their risk with maritime AI and generative AI. We'll talk about it today. Great. So how about we go back to basics? Vadim, what is AI, please?
Yes, AI, what's AI? AI is basically artificial intelligence, as you call it. It's a field in computer science, and it focuses on developing systems to answer questions or tasks which are normally done by humans, such as reasoning, learning, problem solving, decision making, and all those stuff, which typically require humans to do. And now we can do them using algorithms and models. And we process data, we recognize patterns, make predictions, and takes actions. And this is the beautiful field of AI.
Okay, that sounds great. Now I'm going to try again. Let's try. GPT-4o, you're on a webinar right now with AWS and Windward. Can you explain to us what is generative AI?
Sure, Ami. Generative AI refers to algorithms that can create new content, such as text, images, music, or even code. It's like having a super smart assistant that can generate creative outputs based on the data it's trained on. For example, if you feed a generative AI model lots of text, it can write essays or articles. If you give it images, it can create new artworks or enhance photos. This technology leverages machine learning techniques, particularly deep learning, to understand patterns and structures in the data, enabling it to produce something new and often quite impressive. In essence, generative AI isn't just about copying what it sees. It's about creating something original based on learned patterns. This can have wide-ranging applications.
Whoa. Okay, that was too long. Okay, stay with us on the call. This is a webinar. You're going to do this with us, okay?
Got it, Ami. Let's do this.
Sounds good. So, Vadim, you're saying 2023 was the year of the POCs. Can you explain this to me, please?
2023 was the year of POCs in generative AI, because generative AI emerged and it came as a bang. So a lot of customers were asking, about AWS customers to be exactly, what is this thing that's called generative AI? Why do we need it? How do we use it? What can we do with it? And they were trying things, trying various POCs, playing with it, and they were showing cool stuff, but they never actually make real products with it. And this is where we are coming to 2024, which is on the next slide. So we're now 2024. 2024 is the year of production. Now, after many companies played with generative AI in last year, they're now saying, okay, how can we move it to production? How much it costs? Which models should we use? How does it scales? How do we prioritize? And other questions which are important for moving to from the stage of a POC, which, okay, this is cool, this is fun, we see it working, to, all right, now let's get practical. Now let's build real things.
Okay, so how about let's try to dumb it down for me, okay? So give me an example of a POC. Okay, this generative AI thing, I guess I get it. It's going to change the world, a lot of money. Give me an example. What do customers actually do with it?
Well, I see on this slide, on the current slide, you see a lot of things which customers are doing it. The first thing is a chatbot, right? Like you just asked ChatGPT, what's generative AI, and it answered you. So customers were playing with this a lot. They were building simple chatbots and asking simple questions like, what is this? What is that? What is good? But you got to make a product out of it. So the evolution of a chatbot into a product is, for example, a virtual assistant. And you're going to ask questions like, for example, with Amazon Q, which is ask, okay, this is my business data. How can I leverage it? What can we do with the data?
Okay,
And
I want to interject because I saw one of our customers is playing around with Amazon Q, and they opened it for me as well to look at, and they were asking. So they have a big automobile client, so they're asking, what is the status of the happiness of this automobile client, and are they happy with our service? Are they going to churn? Is our customer service good or bad? And what I saw is the Gen AI actually the data they gave, and maybe this is a great segue to this one, I think. By the way, I'm not sharing my full screen because I want to see the Q&A of people.
Yeah.
So if I do, I just can't. So they were feeding the Gen AI, the LLM, with their emails. I think that was the data it was being run on, and it was doing email analysis as well as sentiment analysis. So can you walk me through the concept of your data is your differentiator? Because in previous revolutions, quote unquote, of technology, it was, I think, some incumbents really lost. And it seems to me that if data is your advantage, then perhaps incumbents and many of the big, I can see on the line some big commodity traders, I know some big energy companies, I know big logistics companies, I know, and I know they all have a bunch of data. So can you talk to me about this slide, please?
Yes. As you see, this slide is very, very, very important because if you can look at the top, you see generative AI application. It's the tip of the iceberg. It's what users see. Behind it, you have loads and loads of data. And I'm not talking about generic data, which the LLM was trained on. I'm talking about your data about your customer, the emails you mentioned. We can fit them all inside our database, and we can use this data to enrich our virtual assistant or our chatbot or our Gen AI application, and to give our customers and us much more relevant answers and much more relevant data to act upon.
And Vadim, just quickly here, what's interesting, I love this slide because it's the iceberg is kind of like the ducks on the pond as well, where all you see is the duck, you don't see the feet and everything that goes on beneath the water line. And when it really comes to data, what you're running into is kind of two ways to look at it: the richness of the data that you have and of what you could do with it. But when you start talking about generative AI, it really, it's all about the data. And a lot of what we've seen in the marketplace these days is there's this big rush to do something around generative AI from the boards or from leadership. But if you don't have the right foundation and cleanse your data and harmonize it and hydrate your data lake properly, as we normally say, you can take a really good generative AI application and turn it into something that's worthless because your data is no good. Because just as Ami showed you at the beginning, you can ask a question, you'll get an answer. It may not be the right answer because the data is not correct.
Exactly. And if you take a generative AI application of the marketplace, something like that, it will work, it will say stuff, but it will not be relevant to you. Once you have your data and it's properly stored, properly formatted and stored in the right database and integrated and connected to the application of the generative AI, then things get interesting. Then you get answers which are relevant to you and your customers.
So,
And this is the differentiator.
So I wanna make 2 points here. One point is, interestingly enough, I think tech companies like us just spend much more money and attention naturally on their databases and analytics and data lakes. So I think if you go to a traditional logistics company or traditional trader or traditional shipping company, I'm not sure they've invested like tens of millions into that infra over the last few years. So where they're starting the journey right now to Gen AI is maybe 2 steps behind tech companies. Would you agree with that, Vadim and Eric?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of companies rush into Gen AI and build something because it's trendy, it's cool, but they need the data. They need the data, and they need the right data, and they need to make this data accessible to the Gen AI application.
So, and the second observation I want to make, which is really interesting, is I think in the shipping world, and I'm going to throw a few names here. People for 100 years would have buying data from an IHS or an S&P or a marine traffic or a Lloyd's List or Project 44, and all these companies at the end of the day are providing data. It's third-party data, right? And I think interestingly enough, what I see with boards and CDOs and CIOs I'm speaking to is the Gen AI conversation flips the story on its head a bit, because it makes the corporate start from their application and their data lake and their needs and talk to people like us versus just say, which data can you give me? Or can you give me this, like where the ship is going or where the cargo is going or where the container is going? So do you guys see that as well in your conversations, that the focus is less on which data we can buy and more on what problem we're trying to solve?
Absolutely, and it's where the question, should have been in the first place in solving the problem, because what it reminds me of, especially in the ocean industry and what we've seen historically over the last couple of years. I mean, just look at the number of providers that are out in the market space doing very similar things around aggregating data, but they're not, with the exception of certain companies like Windward, they are not actually then doing something with that data and providing value to their customers. What they're doing is they're just acting as another aggregator of data. So when you get, the large companies like P44, FourKites, and others, it reminds me very much of a long time ago when I was in the military, and it was the same thing. We had projects like this and data applications, and it was just a pyramid. It was everyone trying to jump to the top and claim that they were the best provider of data because they had the most amount of connections. Well, that's tactical stakes these days. Everyone has the connections to the data. Now it's about, well, what company is doing the right things with the data to provide value to their customers.
Cool, I love it. Okay, let's move on. So your data is a differentiator. So Vadim, maybe you can walk me through this, because when I meet customers, one of the first thing I hear is, yeah, we're a marine insurance company. We just take our claims and put it into GPT and it should work. And actually it does work for like once or twice. But for the next 37,000 times, it doesn't. And then they get disappointed. And so that's when I tell them, listen, there's a reason they're called foundational models. They're not called, please press a button and everything will be solved in your life. Do you agree with that statement, or do you not? And how can you walk me through this for a second?
Yes, I agree. I agree with this statement. Generative AI foundation models, as we call them, they are not a one-fit-all solution.
Yep.
Sometimes just taking your data and adding it to the models gives great results. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes we have to fine-tune the models or even continuously retrain the model. And this greatly improves our result. If they're saying, okay, let's just add the claims, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't mean that it will never work. it
Yep.
will just require more effort on their side. It requires more research. It requires to optimize the models, to fine-tune them, and to retrain them. And then they will get great results.
So I wanna pull like the technical card for a second, which is I want you to talk to me about RAG for a second, okay? Because if you look at customers' data, I think their data breaks down to two main parts: structured data and unstructured data. Structured data, I'll give examples. You know, AIS is structured data. Fixtures like tables of who fixes which vessel, that's structured data. Tables of who owns a vessel, that's structured data. Container milestone information, that's structured data. Then you have unstructured data, for example, your rent contract on your flat, your prenup, if you have any, your whatever, right? Your contracts with your providers and your vendors, that's unstructured data. And actually, Gen AI allows us to tackle the problem of extracting data from that unstructured data. Because previously, NLP and OCR is all we had to deal with. So Vadim, can you maybe take a step back and maybe explain to me structured and unstructured? And maybe, Eric, you can also provide examples from customers about structured and unstructured, because I think it's a really important point. It's not just let's throw all our data into a data lake and figure the shit out, right? It's also, what is the data? Could I even get it out previously, or could I not? So Vadim, can you start with that, please?
Yes, so yes, of course. Generative AI models can work with both structured and unstructured data. As you said, structured data is like you got from a database, it has some schema and it's well defined. And unstructured data is just text documents, contracts, and stuff like that. Both of them can be used to enhance generative AI and get better results. You mentioned RAG. So if we take unstructured data, we add it to our vector database, and we integrate this vector database with our generative AI model using embedding models. And then we can filter and extract relevant data from this RAG, from those text documents previously, which were unstructured, and augment our prompts with it and get better results from our LLM model. This is a great way to use unstructured data, for example. If you want to use structured data, things are even more straightforward. We can use, for example, Bedrock agents. What Bedrock agent does, as part of its flow, it calls APIs. It calls APIs, it calls well-defined APIs, like, for example, give me this data about this vessel, and about a couple of like its position in the water and stuff like that. And we add it to the prompt and we set it to LLM model and we get relevant results. So both types of data can help us a lot. And the handling is different. And
Yep.
as we see on this current slide, no one size fits it all. We need to see which data you have and how it's best to use it.
Sure.
No,
Eric,
and
can you give me some
you also get a
examples?
lot, you get a lot of companies out there today that I jokingly say that they arrange their data like when you ask your children to arrange their rooms. You know, it starts out as structured data, and then they throw everything in all different drawers. And so then when it comes time to sort it and find it, it makes it very challenging to then go back and cleanse it and harmonize it again. And you also, especially in this industry, there are a lot of homegrown systems that have been built. And so while it may be structured data to you, then having to bring it into a data lake to be able to convert it into something useful, it can be a bit challenging at times. And that's one, actually, funny enough, it's one of the greatest uses these days of generative AI is to automate bringing in a lot of that data so then that it can actually be used for a generative AI or an ML type application.
So in other words, I think maybe the way I think about it is many customers simply haven't touched their own data for a long while.
Yeah.
Especially not their unstructured data. They were touching their structured data because that's what they were used to do. So from our experience and from the customers we're working with, actually the ability to connect, quote unquote, that contract thing to the physical reality is quite a big thing. There's a dissonance, a disparity between what people have signed up that they're going to give you and what they give you, what your vendors are supposed to provide you and what they provide you, what the TNCs that governs your shipments or your trades and actually the reality. Have you seen such cases kind of in your business, Eric, when you go around and because you speak a lot with many customers, I guess. So if anybody is with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, another thing about the industry that we're in is there have been so many acquisitions and mergers. And so like if to your point, it's not uncommon to have, companies that will have multiple systems that are performing very similar functions, but just in different business units. And because of all the mergers that have happened, and like I said, we used to see this a lot as well with like 3PLs, where you'll have a 3PL that's running 5 different warehouse management systems across like 200 different locations.
Wow.
And then they're running different versions as well. So the data schema may be different, like, for example, with the Blue Yonder, whether you're above 2016 or below 2016. So we see it all the time. And I think because of the fractured nature a bit of the industry itself, or the silos of the functions that are performed, it then becomes exponential in the fracturing of the systems as well.
So maybe that I think one of the things that Eric people don't necessarily get is why is AWS involved in all this? And I don't think it's a trivial question, by the way, because I'm not kidding at all. I think clearly AWS is a cloud provider, I think first and foremost, right? But also tools provider like Bedrock and obviously SageMaker and other tools, right? But what I see at least is that many of our customers are pretty far away from AWS in the cloud. So if you just to speak candidly, right? By the way, also from the Microsofts and Google Clouds of the world, right? If I may even mention their name. So how do you see that distance in the organization collapsing between the business buyers, if you will, and the operational people who trade and move stuff, right, all day long, or take like operational decisions, hire things, move things, and the cloud people and the Gen AI people? Is that collapsing because of Gen AI, or is that still very distant?
I think I think it is collapsing, not necessarily just because of generative AI. I think it's a catalyst that's driving it to move faster. One of the things that I've noticed in my time with AWS is that when I first joined the company, we were very, like you say, we were very focused on tools. We have applications like Bedrock or EC2 or this to perform a function. Now, and which I think is the right way, because I always start with business process first and looking at the business side, is translating, the technology and the tools into the functional use case to actually solve a business problem. And so what I've seen over the last, 2.5 years, is really more of a pivot towards more of that focus of business, so that you can bring IT and you can bring the business operation side together so they can be working together versus working separately, which historically what you've seen in a lot of organizations.
So I'm going to pull in a question here. Are we likely to see the development of universal data standards in shipping, which might help give some baseline to help ship owners more easily manage and integrate data across fleets and systems? I'm sorry, I'm the shipping expert here, I think, so I'm going to try and take it. It's a good question. I think first of all, the question is which type of data. By the way, shipping data, there are pretty standardized things like noon reports, but I'm not sure they're used a lot. So I actually think that specifically shipping is quite competitive. So people like to silo information unless third parties request or demand them. Because of the nature in shipping that everybody competes with everybody, because it's a commodity, especially bulk industry, is commoditized, and people don't like data standards because that means it passes between people. And actually, the big boys have such a scale advantage. And I can see it, our biggest, like the big ship owners that are our customers, the big bunkering customers, the big energy companies. I went to one of our energy companies last week, customers here in London, and they had their company name .ai on vests of people getting into the room that I was having a meeting in, and I've never seen that. So I actually think we'll see less standardization because the big players have less of an interest to standardize, except if it's hygiene, like safety. Safety, everybody agree on. So safety, people will give each other, but otherwise not. Okay, so I wanna move into this a bit and explain vertical AI. Vadim, do you want to give it a try? What is vertical AI?
Yes, vertical AI is a domain-specific AI which focused on vertical business, like the shipping industry, and it's all specific problems in its business. Basically, it's the same AI as we know it, the same AI from our previous talks and all the things we said, all the great things. But the data is data from a specific vertical, for example, the shipping industry, and it answers for problems that are specific to the industry.
Okay, so what's the connection between vertical AI and generative AI? Because GPT-4 is pretty damn smart. So why do we need to teach it anything else?
Yeah, it sounds like a trick question because we answered it already. The connection is the data.
Okay.
The data is the key connection.
So in order to understand the data, we need to train it or upload knowledge in the knowledge base or tune it. What do we need to do?
First of all, we need to understand the data of the industry, of the vertical, and then we can do various things. First of all, we can ingest the data in our knowledge base. This is the most common option. Another option is we can use this data to fine-tune our models. And then we get better results for this vertical in this industry, and we get vertical AI.
Okay, so I think that's brilliant. I think in this industry, whether it's bulk or shipping or logistics or trading, this is vertical. So, or insurance, this is like way vertical, right? Because
yes, of course.
If you think about, let me give you an example of something that's not vertical. Personal assistant, that's not vertical. Okay. Customer service, that's not vertical. We all get angry at people who give us bad service, right? Whether it's your phone bill or your water bill, or if it's the plumber or anything. So we all need customer service. That's horizontal. So actually the horizontal world is much bigger than the vertical world, but like in terms of size of users, I guess, right? By definition. But the vertical users, if you don't verticalize, and I have a few examples. So an example of vertical AI would be the way we do ship-to-ship transfers with the deep learning. So it's very specific. You need to know how ship-to-ship transfers. You need to know the data, and you know how it's being done, and what's the weather, and the types of ships, and how long it's going to take, and draft, so forth. Another example would be ETA prediction. If you want to stitch together containers through different transshipments and understand where they're going to arrive, and congestion, it's not just generic data. And I have many more examples. Spoofing, if we detect GNSS manipulations when people spoof their location, it's very verticalized. You need to understand how people spoof. You need to uncover 2,500 cases and reverse engineer them and understand what they're doing. And marine insurance data, what is predictive of marine accidents? Like, who knows, right? You need to spend like years researching it. These are all vertical applications. In my view, generative AI just is another enhancement on that. And actually, Vadim, I don't necessarily agree with you on everything you said, and I think it's a nuance, but it's an important nuance, because I think our experience shows that you do need to create a lot of knowledge base and prompt engineering to make the agents more expert. So, one of the energy companies I visited last week told me they're building a bunch of quote unquote, it's their words, not my words, virtual subject matter experts. Eric, have you heard of such things in companies?
A virtual subject matter expert. Okay, I'm curious what that is and how that works.
So for them, they're saying, listen, for them, we have an expert on gas, okay? Gas purchase, gas trading. And our traders are busy trading, but some people who are in the ancillary like of that need information on gas trading, which is time sensitive, but you don't need to be like a super expert. So we don't want to take the trader out of this desk and lose money. We're going to train a virtual subject matter expert, give him 10 years of experience and have him back. We do this with logistics agents. We've trained a logistics agent which has about a decade of experience in logistics, and a compliance agent which is a decade of experience in shipping and risk. And that allows a decade of experience, specific experience, to be loaded into GPT. How do you call that? Knowledge bases or knowledge spaces, Vadim?
Yes, knowledge bases or RAG. It's very similar things. And yeah,
Okay.
this is
I
exactly.
want to talk about that a bit. So this is Deloitte, and this is stats from Deloitte, and I think it's really cool because it's really examples of how, like, the benefits to the companies, right? So productivity improvement, is it something you've seen guys, people do with Gen AI? Can you give me a couple examples?
Couple example is you can think about, let's say you need to solve a problem, right? Anything, no matter if it's a vertical or it's something else. And you have to find a solution. So you go, you search the web, it takes you like an hour maybe to find the solution, then you find the solution. With productivity improvement, for example, you have your own virtual assistant. Just ask him a question and you get your answer. And because this is already trained on your vertical data, so you get something much more relevant. And it gives you productivity improvement.
So I spoke to one of our logistics customers, and they've done exactly that. They've taken their standard operating procedures, and they just summarize them. And then an operator says, "Hey, I got a container stuck right now and it hasn't arrived. What should I do?" And instead of going, like, flicking through 76 pages of like an instruction manual, they're just, "Oh, what do you mean? You need to notify the customer. Here's the format. Boom." Is that
No, exactly. And looking at like your virtual assistant example, I mean, that's where you get the productivity gains right away, because just think of all the things that you do that are like task based in your job that could be, expedited if you, had immediate access to asking a simple question and getting an answer for it instead of having to go out and comb through all this data and look for things.
It happens to us as well. We have a customer and they ask us a technical question. Sometimes the guy or lady speaking to them doesn't remember the answer because you have a lot of products and data, and it's like buried in a document from 5 years ago. And I remember 256.2-3, right? So I think just access to these knowledge bases is a good example. I think also revenue uplift. So I've seen our products, and without getting too much details, helping people just bill more. So that we've seen and maybe Eric, you've seen that example as well, that sometimes things just get lost, and using, like, if you combine contracts and physical information, and you get people, like, how they're supposed to operate their business, they can bill more, just bill their customers properly, but also collapse time to bill. So I've seen people use generative AI to collapse just the billing process from 6 months to a day. Have you seen something like that?
Very much so. And I actually think looking at these numbers, I wholeheartedly agree with the process improvement. I actually think the cost reduction and the revenue uplift is understated here in the potential. I think what you're seeing is kind of like what you highlighted earlier, that the difference between 2023 being the year of POCs and 2024 being the year of production. I think what you're going to see also is that it's a bit of a phase. And what I mean by that is, for the people that are listening to this podcast or will be listening to it later, just because you haven't done a POC or you're not in production today doesn't mean you're behind. It depends on where you are in the cycle, where your systems are. So I think you're going to see a lot bigger numbers when it comes to cost reduction and revenue uplift in the future, when people really start figuring out what is the best application for them and how can they use these tools.
Okay, so I have a question here. Can you explain how vertical AI systems handle the complexity? Well, it's a good question. Handle the complexity of varying tariff regulations across different countries and regions. Big one. Eric, do you want to try?
Yeah, I'll take a first shot at it. The first answer is it's incredibly challenging and it's not going to work everywhere today. Back to what you were pointing out earlier, a lot of the challenges that we have today around, everything from tariffs to, basically import export rules and all that, It's
And
very,
Biden just slapped a lot of tariffs on China, right?
yeah, no, yeah, well, yeah,
100% on EVs. That's a big one.
yeah, yeah, that. It's a very interesting one. Like I said, tariffs tend to drive political agenda at times, but
No,
not
no,
going
not in
in.
this case. No, no. There's no election coming soon.
No, not at all. So, but what I was getting at is what you're going to find is, kind of like what we saw when we did the supply chain information highway project at the port of Long Beach. And so one of these things where we built a supply chain data lake and it's being replicated out to other ports around North America. The technology is the very easy part to do this stuff. The hard part is the politics and the multiple number of players that are involved and getting them all to agree to work together on this stuff. So I think what you'll see in the future around tariffs as well as import export rules and paperwork is you're going to see it work, on certain high value or high volume lanes, and it'll slowly expand from there.
Okay. So I'm going to take a stab, and I think tariffs isn't something I think anybody solved yet. And I think one of the reasons it hasn't been solved is because of the huge complexity of it.
Yeah.
I think having said that, one of the issues we've seen with RAG and Gen AI is you can't just blindly trust it. So the flip side of the model, of the black box model, it doesn't tell you that it's wrong. So the safeguard and the guardrails and the QA also that is picking up the data correctly are super important. Because if you tell your customers, if I go tell my customers today, hey guys, do you want a great answer 90% of the time? The answer is no. Because they need to take 100% of the decisions, right? So like a great answer 90% is worthless. So Vadim, what are the approaches you've seen in people tackling that challenge? Because it's a challenge with Gen AI, right?
Yes. So first of all, the more you retrain the model, the more you do continuous pre-training, the better answers you get. And yes, the solution is not to trust the model blindly.
Yep.
You need humans in the loops once in a while to verify the answers. And you also need to be aware of it. So sometimes the answer will be wrong. Sometimes the model will be hallucinating. And you need to put your guardrails.
What is guardrails? Can you explain to me, please?
Yes. Guardrails is it's how you trust the model, basically. Okay.
I don't. I'm kidding.
You don't. So it means what you trust it to do. For example, if you want, like we said in an example before, you're trying to solve some customer service related issue, and you ask the virtual assistant and you get an answer, and you try to solve it using its answer. So if it's work, it's great. If it doesn't work, then you need to be ready. You need to prepare an alternative solution yourself for this 5%. So you always need a backup plan. And you cannot like blindly trust it. I mean, if you simply use your virtual assistant to get a solution to the problem and you're on the phone with the customer, you can't just tell him exactly what the model told you.
So the way it was explained to me was really good, I think, is you should think of the Gen AI like a human. Okay.
Exactly.
When Eric gives me an answer, yes, I always trust him, but I don't take everything blindly. I kind of think about what I'm being told, right? It's not like, hey, where can I buy some popsicles? To the right. And if in the right there's a road, you don't just go in there and you don't die on the road. You think about, should I go there, right? And I think we've been used to computers who give us answers. I think this is more of a rounded indication, I would call it. By the way, my answer is slightly different. I think we've learned that we can leverage our back office to verify these answers if they're very important. And actually, in the logistics space, it's very well known. So I've seen like hordes of people in rooms, there's like hundreds of them, verify things on like Maersk's website 10,000 times, right? So it's a very manual industry with a lot of people verifying manually. So I think if you take that away from the customer, you leverage that with tech and scale in a back office and combine that with LLMs, that's a really, I think, dependable solution. Okay, Eric, what's the state of the industry?
It's a very interesting right now. Of course, we've seen shipping costs going like this repeatedly over the last 3 years for a lot of different reasons. Clients are big on labor lately. A lot of shortages in labor. During COVID, we were short the number of people. Now the biggest thing is finding the right people. So to your point, everyone's looking for, okay, who knows generative AI? Who knows data lakes? Who knows this, or particular tools? Clients, of course, are really interested in applications like Windward offers because they're focused on trying to increase resiliency and reduce risk in their overall operations. And then on the bottom there, you'll see I kind of have a couple highlights. Sustainability is an interesting one for me because being in the transportation and logistics vertical, I say it kind of depends on where you sit. You know, my truckers here, most of them don't care about being sustainable because in the US, 95% of the trucking companies are 10 or fewer vehicles, you know, and so they're all mom and pops and they're just trying to survive. And I still think the industry, you know, like a lot of the ocean carriers are starting to come out with sustainable fuels, but not a lot of shippers or, you know, are willing to pay those extra fees yet, you know, for the sustainable fuels. And then the only other two things I highlight, normally to customers are we've seen a lot of correction in the market recently. And it goes back to what I said earlier. There's, you know, historically there were a lot of companies that were doing ocean tracking and monitoring. And now it's really starting to narrow down to, I like to say, a bit of musical chairs. There's only getting down to a few providers that actually are giving value to their clients and offering new technologies like what you guys are doing. And which then leads me to the last one, which is, you know, when I talk to people, I talk to a range in the transportation and logistics industry. So, you know, 3PLs, rail, trucking, ocean, air. And it really depends on where they are and where their systems are. So what I normally will tell people is, you know, generative AI is awesome. There are many great things that you can do with it, but, you know, you don't have to necessarily be rushing into it. I suggest that you pick the things that, you know, start small, as we used to say, you know, start small, fail small, and start playing with it and see how you can use it within your own applications. Because I still have clients today that are focused in doing traditional AI and ML before they're even getting to generative AI yet.
So that's cool. I want to actually to pick up on the labor shortages here.
Sure.
So in the Garden conference last year, I think in June in Barcelona, and where there's one in Chicago, but what I've seen is actually people is one of the biggest challenges. Just like hiring people and training people. I can see it also. We work with legal officers and due diligence and compliance, and just it's unbelievable. There's just, first of all, they're flooded because there's Russia, I think the name is. There's like a Russia-Ukraine war. Russia became the most sanctioned country on earth, and they're just like they're snowed under. They just can't move, and they just can't hire people and train them. So actually,
well, it's funny to see what's happened in the last couple of years after COVID. There was a McKinsey report that talked about logistics transformation, and it listed all the things that were barriers to doing logistics transformation based on feedback from the industry. And it was done, I think, between McKinsey and Council of Supply Chain Management about a year and a half ago. And everything flipped. So it used to be like the reason I wasn't doing something was I couldn't prove the ROI or I didn't have executive buy-in. What's interesting is the number one thing right now is I don't have the right data or it's not cleansed and harmonized. And number two is people. Once again, is finding the right people with the right skill set.
So, and that brings me to the virtual subject matter experts. In my view, actually, Gen AI can deliver virtual subject matter experts, which are a decade or so experience, which can take away a lot of the repetitive work that you can do today. And I'm not talking like 3 years in the future. 3 years in the future, I can actually automate a lot of the logistics, but we'll get to it. Okay, so Vadim, I have a question, a very technical question from the crowd here. I'm going to try and read it. I'm not sure I understand it. The way we're implementing guardrails is by keeping the temperature as 0 and by some smart prompt engineering. Is that the way to go? Vadim, you're going to explain to us, please, what is temperature 0?
Yeah, temperature basically controls the variance in the responses. Okay, so it makes the responses.
It's like, is Vadim handsome? So temperature 0 is yes, 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 but temperature 10 is yes, maybe.
Yeah.
Not sure. Like that's a good example.
we get more consistency, but it doesn't ensure us to get right answers. We can get the same answer always, but it will always be wrong. This happens. So this is not enough. This is not enough, and we need to use other methods like we discussed. We need human in the loop to check the answers.
So your answer is no. It's not the right way.
It's not the right way. Yeah. That's
Okay. Sorry, I'm just and I think that leads me to the next question, which is how does vertical AI ensure the accuracy and reliability of data collected from various sources within the maritime trade ecosystem? So I don't know who asked this question, but it's a perfect segue to hit this one, because if you look at the top left end, you see Windward curated data. So I think this has been an epiphany for me. You know, we started a company with trying to automate everything. I was wrong. Is this being recorded? I was wrong. Because I think you can do it, but it's very expensive and very long because there's so much edge cases. I think that's one comment. Like, and I think container tracking is a good example. The carrier gives you information, about half of the times it will tell you a week after the case that the container is in the depot. And you know what? Customers hate that. They just hate that because they're telling you, I know the bloody container is back. Why aren't you showing it? And I think that's what causes lack of trust in the data. And that's what causes churn, by the way. Because in a detail-oriented industry where every transaction matters, coming back to my 90% isn't good enough, it's enough that you'll make that mistake 5 times and you're done. That's it. People are like, right, you know, I can't trust this data. I'm going back to the Maersk website. So I'm done. And I've heard actually one of the companies we mentioned today, I think I've heard of a lot of customers kind of pushing back and saying, you know what, it's not just worth the effort. You know, it's just not worth $1 million or two to improve the data 10% if it's just so much unreliability. So let's just give up. So I think we've learned we need to curate our data. And that's the first answer about how, even before Gen AI, how do you verify that the data is correct with vertical AI? Because the way you curate the data is with a lot of domain knowledge and technology. It's not manual. Then you have algorithms with maritime AI and vertical AI that are trained on labeled data sets. So when you train a vertical AI algorithm, you need labeled data set, whether you get it or you create it. The ship-to-ship example is cool because we just use like thousands of satellite images to create that data set, and then you can label it, and then you can train an algorithm on it. So it's a cool example. Then you combine customer unstructured and structured data, which we mentioned RAG, and there you put a curated data as well. So there you do the QA as well, and then finally you do the agents. So it's a schlep. So maybe a question to you, Vadim. So what is the balance you think between enterprises building all of this to themselves and between working with companies like us? Because theoretically, you know, if I'm a CIO, bloody hell, hey guys, here's $500,000. Please build some Gen AI for me. Does it not go that way?
Well, first of all, the more you cooperate, the more data you get. The more data sources you get, the more cross checks on the data you can have. And it's better to do this. But of course, companies like Windward are experts in the field, and they have their own curated data, which is probably much better than you can get from the outside. But it's still better to have more and cross-check and validate.
Okay, another question. Who will be liable when an AI starts to hallucinate? Will that be the data owner, builder of the LLM, or else?
Oh, well, this is a trick question.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'm kidding.
Yeah, this is a trick question.
Sorry, I'm kidding. But
to be honest, it's more of a business-related question than a technical-related question, but I'll try to answer. It depends on the contract, on what the model provider is obligated by the contract, by the terms of use agreement and stuff like that to provide you. If there is a liability, then this party is liable.
Well, and also if there's a hallucination, it's going to be due to the data, okay, and it's going to be due to the source of the data, you know, and the cleansing. So it's kind of like basically automated driving here. You know, that the biggest challenge right now is not necessarily the technology around the driving; it's legalese for who's going to be responsible for what. Now that has a much higher implication and results if something were to happen, but. To me, like I said, it's not necessarily the model. It's not necessarily the engine that's running the querying. It is all going to come back to who's responsible for getting the right data and getting the data cleansed.
I gotta say, I have an answer. If people contract with us, I'm responsible personally. That's it. It's very simple. I think dancing around that is just BS. Because
It's like asking who's responsible when two self-driving cars have an accident.
yeah, you know what?
It's
Yeah.
the same thing.
It's the same thing, but I think in this case, so when we have our database says, this vessel is owned by this vessel, by this company, who's responsible? We're responsible. Maybe there's a mistake. We can leave a website, leave in their number on the website. We're happy to fix it if you have the proof, right? If the container is in the right place, who's responsible? We're responsible. So if you pay top dollars for an AI product, you need to make sure the company takes responsibility on the curated data. And I think it's also a partnership thing, in my view. Going on with the customer on a journey is they need to know they can trust. 2 a.m., shit hits the fan, which obviously it never does, but sometimes it does. Can they call you and can they trust you? And it's the same answer for LLMs. It's not a different answer. It's just another tool that can go crazy. Okay, so I think we're running out of time. Last thoughts, please. Famous last words. Vadim, what does the future hold for generative?
So the future holds
for O, and after Gemini, and I'm going to ask GPT-O for O, what does he think the future holds for generative AI? But you
so
go.
the future holds great things. We're advancing at great pace. The innovation is unbelievable in the field of Gen AI. We are moving into the direction of agents, which will not be only asking the LLM for answers, but also to perform actions and to act on your behalf using structured and unstructured data. We are going into the world of multimodal, for example, using the LLM to generate text and video, for example, simultaneously. We are going into the direction of using multiple models in the same product.
Yep.
Selecting the right model for the right use case.
Yep.
And of course, we have more and more regulations on the data, like we just discussed responsibility, who is responsible, how the data is regulated. So all those things are moving forward and technology is advancing at great pace.
Hey, Eric.
I would agree wholeheartedly, and I would leave our listeners with two thoughts. One is the point you brought up about, expertise. In this space, what I found historically is a lot of 3PLs, a lot of providers. I'm a big fan of Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, which says you should focus on doing that effort which generates the best and most robust economic response. And so what I'm getting at is there are experts in generative AI, like Windward and others. And so you should talk to those experts and start trying to work with them versus trying to recreate the wheel yourself within your own organization. The second thing that I like to leave people with that a lot of people aren't thinking about when it comes to generative AI is power and data centers. One of the things that you're going to see, the future's bright, but we're going to have to, as a nation and as a world, figure out how we're going to do this, because the amount of power that we're going to have to pull to be able to really then start exponentially expanding a lot of these tools are going to get real interesting real quick.
I agree. So I have two more questions here. We're going to try to address them soon, and then I'm going to ask GPT-4, what is he or she or it? I don't know. How should I call it? We're going to come back to that soon. So how much training is required to work with your service and understand the risks, limits, and human check requirements? I don't know who asked that. At the end, the answer, it depends, usually as little as possible. But I think, in my view, people are the biggest challenge. So I think we take a lot of action to make sure that's as little as possible. But it really depends what the product is. Another customer asked, somebody else asks, can you share a case study where AI-driven analysis has led to significant financial operational benefits for maritime companies? Yes. Number one, bunkering, which is marine fueling, sourcing, who can you call, sales qualified leads to make more money? Absolutely. I think we have proof for that. That's 100%. Second is the margin detention.
Exactly.
I think you can, if you're a forwarder, you can double your margin if you use it properly. And if you want, you can talk to us. And I'm sure we're just scratching the surface. You know, we're talking to our customers about claim automation, if you're a marine insurance company, about late payment demurrage, charter party compliance. It's just endless. I think I'm not sure anybody has the answer, but I'm sure this is the approach to figuring out the answer together. So I'm gonna do what I promised, and let's see, and I hope you can tap to activate. Okay. Hello, GPT-4. We're finishing up the webinar on the future of generative AI, and you are the belle of the ball. You are the star of the show. And I'd like you please to tell me, what does the future hold for generative AI? And do me a favor, give me a better answer than Gemini 1.5 Flash. Okay, go for it. The tension. It's killing me.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now.
Okay, I think the question about Gemini 1.5 just killed GPT-4o. No problem, GPT-4. You should work on reliability, and you just proved us that LLMs will be getting there, but they're not there yet. To everybody who joined us, Eric, thank you very much. Enjoy Montreal. Vadim, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a blast. For those of you who stay with us, about 100 of you, thank you very much for joining, and we're going to talk to you soon.